So I think it's quite fitting that we're sitting outside today because of the restrictions on us at the moment. Because as a family, we always seem to have the most amazing adventures in the great outdoors. And today I'm interviewing my wonderful auntie Vanessa Branson because she's written a book and I'm doing a Meet the Author. She's written a book called 100 Summers, A Family Story. And I just want to thank you so much, Ness, because it's an amazing book. Every single page, I just loved reading it. And thank you for taking that time to chronicle our family's history and chronicle our family, because it takes time and effort, and writing it all down, you've done such a good job. So thank you very much. And I can't wait to dive in and ask you lots of questions about it.
Oh, thanks, Holly. Well, it's such an honour to be here with you. And, I was thinking this morning, even though we're outside, I'm in such warm company. It's a great moment. Thank you.
Oh, it is. And in the book, you're not just a sister to an entrepreneur or a daughter or a wife. You tell all the stories about what you've done in your life so brilliantly, like how you used your love for art to become an amazing curator, and how you used your love for hotels to be a award-winning hotelier, and it's just, and your love for design to be an interior designer. So you've done so much with your life and so much put down on paper. It's brilliant.
Well, thank you very much indeed. It's great, but it was interesting what kicked it off in the first place, if I might say this, because it was 2017, and I was with a friend of ours, Stephen Navin, as you know, in a yoga retreat in Sri Lanka. And it was the morning of Donald Trump's inauguration, and we were just I just felt very, I was very distressed actually, because on the heels of Brexit, I felt as if so many people's values were at odds with my own, and I sort of wanted to investigate where those values came from, because it's no good just complaining.
So you interviewed family members, and was there diaries to go back and look through? Or
yeah, well, the glorious thing about I never kept a diary. I never got bogged down in too much detail. And the great thing about our lives now is that, especially with Richard's life being so chronicled, I had very strong dates to hinge, sort of coat hangers of dates. I knew exactly where I was always through the story, because everything is so well chronicled. I mean, funny enough, I talked to Rick. Another great thing about writing a memoir is you talk to people with a pen and paper, and you really want to listen. And it's such an enriching experience talking to people and they love it because you're interested in the answers, rather than this sort of rather superficial way that we often all live. And so, I got great Aunt Claire just before she died, and I got her. I mean, I had long talks with her, and it was just a joy to visit her, because we had a reason for connecting as well. And then I sat down with your dad and said, have you got any memories from our childhood? And he just can't remember anything that hasn't already been written about him. I mean, it's sort of like, he only remembers what's been written because he's told stories so often. But I had a few little gems up my sleeve.
Did you help prompt his memories? Do you think they came back really, or?
I don't know. I mean, I gave him he was my first reader, absolutely my first reader, and it was a very rough draft. I mean, when you write a book, everybody tells you this, and I highly recommend your viewers do this. You just got to get it out there. Don't be too hung up on the full stops. Don't be too hung up on the structure and everything. And it'll just flow if you don't worry about thinking you're going to be marked like an essay at school. And he read that very first, very rough draft that I'd written, and I could see his heart sinking, when I said I've written a book. And he's sort of, oh God, all right, what's going to happen and what's going to come out? And he read it in one sitting, flying back to Necker, and called me up as soon as he landed, and was really, really excited about it. So I think it triggered happy memories for him. But it also contextualizes the family, and it's not just a family photograph album with funny little. It's got some moral fibre to it.
It is, and there's some bits that are quite shocking. What was the bits that you found in the 100 years? Was there anything that shocked you the most?
I'm not sure shocking. what I found very exciting was how everything that you do in life has consequences for the future, even if it's 20 years ahead. And then when you look back a generation or two, you see those consequences playing out in your generation. And I found that really exciting. And we're very fortunate that we've got generations of stability behind us. I mean, I read one or two other books. I've been reading a lot of memoirs, and a number of memoirs that cover the same period of time. And boy, we've got some solid foundations in our family, and it made me very grateful for that. Really grateful.
We have those solid foundations, but you talk quite a lot about the beginning when my dad and Lindy are quite a lot older than you, and you were left at home with Granny and Granddaddy quite a lot on your own when they went off to boarding school, and you had quite a lot of loneliness in your childhood. Do you think that shaped you in any way?
Yeah, I mean, Mum and Dad were, they went through the war. I mean, Dad was born in 1918, as we said, and, just at the end of the First World War, absolutely the prime age, 20, to go off to fight in the Second World War. And it was tough. I mean, they never complained, but they had no room for sentimentality at all. And so when things happened to us, when we were kids.
Oh, could you tell the story about your pony?
Oh, gosh,
because that makes me very sad.
Well, okay, so when you're writing a memoir, another thing you have to do, here I am having written one, but I've done it, and I can share in this, and it really amazed me how it happened, is I didn't pre-plot it out or pre-plan it out at all. I just wrote it. And it is as if you are just dragging your fingers through the sediment of the river of your life and unlocking bubbles of memory, and you catch them as they float to the surface. And it was extraordinary. Suddenly, a memory that you haven't had for a long time, or you think was insignificant, bubbles up, and you think, why am I writing about this? It was a very sort of profound moment. And then when you get to 30 years later, you realise why that memory was necessary. So it's an incredible process. I can't tell you how everybody should do it when they get to my stage.
And did more memories come the more you started doing it?
Yeah, and that particular one just came out of nowhere. And Mum was, we had this extraordinary childhood in many ways. It was such a happy childhood, such a bubbling, lots and lots of people. My parents were just endlessly generous, and not they didn't have lots of cash at all, but just made big vegetable garden. Mum always boiled up bones with endless soups. Dad made homemade wine, and we had an amazing and then when Richard and Lindy left home, I was sort of on my own quite a lot. I went off to boarding school, but in the holidays when you're 10, you don't know anybody, and it was a very lonely time actually. And one morning Mum was a magistrate, and I was sort of lying in bed, and she just called up as she was leaving for work and said, "Oh Ness, by the way, Snowy's dead." And Snowy was my childhood friend and pony that I'd had since I was 6, and so I just didn't know what to do, and so I went up to the field, and there he was, just lying stiff by the phone, and it's such a sad thing. And then trying to call the knacker yard myself, I couldn't spell knacker, I couldn't get hold of a. Just remember it. I remember thinking, a 12-year-old shouldn't be doing this.
No, and it's just so different to what we would do with our kids nowadays. Yeah. Although maybe it wasn't different generational thing, maybe it was just the way Granny was in comparison to other
I think she
mothers.
was particularly tough, but it has, and I see it with Richard, and it's, when life gets tough when you become an adult, it really taught me resilience. I mean, the number of times I had to fall back on calling the knacker yard moment, where you've just got no option but to deal with things. I'm eternally grateful to Mum for giving me that resilience as a child.
Maybe just a little bit younger than you'd ordinarily have hoped.
I mean, bringing up my own kids, I endlessly fell back on her wisdom actually, and you know, I mean, she's 96 now, and still, I still take enormous pleasure in her company, and
I love her bits of wisdom still now. She's always coming out with the most amazing things to help us in our life.
She really. I've been trying to film it and Instagram a few of them out, and you know, because she was a showgirl. When you know she's very elderly now, and her she's got vascular dementia, not Alzheimer's. So her short-term memory's shot, but all of her humour and wisdom's there. And I say, Mum, I want you to give a message to the nation. And I hold my camera up and she squares her shoulders back and she projects something marvellous, and it really is great.
It's so good every time, so good.
Yeah.
There's something in the book that sort of resonates with me, and that's where you talk about how you used to dress as a boy a lot as a child.
Yeah.
And I never knew that, and it's something that I did when I was little. From the age of 3 to 11, I very much thought of myself as a boy.
Well, look at the cover there.
Yes, I know. I mean, it doesn't. I mean, it actually looks like some of your kids in that picture. But do you have any thought about why you did that? Why you felt you just wanted to dress like a boy? And
I think I was, you know, a classic tomboy, just like you. You know, it was. I hadn't been exposed to so much sort of sexual imagery as a kid, and I was really happy with my strength and my sort of physical abilities. You know, I had a country upbringing, and I could, you know, skin a rabbit, jump on the bareback on a horse, gallop up a field, build dens, swim in cold water. And I still love that about myself, that I can do all those things.
You are amazing jumping into cold water. It's something that I can never do. Nessie is literally Christmas Day in Scotland, swimming in the sea. Yes, so when I was younger, I don't know whether it's similar to your experience, but I genuinely thought I was a boy. And I was, from the age of 3 to 11, dressed as a boy. I stood up to pee. I would call myself boys' names. And looking back on it, I think maybe I'd had my mum and dad for nearly 4 years of myself to myself, and my brother came along and he was a boy, and I don't know, maybe that sort of triggered something where I was jealous, and I thought maybe, I have no idea, maybe I need to have some therapy to go back and see whether we can unearth it. But I loved it. I loved being that tomboy. I had 9 male cousins and Flo, so we were just surrounded by boys, and I loved being one of them. Yeah. So I don't think it had any detrimental effect on me in the slightest, and actually probably pushed me forward a lot, because I was very much like you, outdoors, climbing trees,
Lovely.
enjoying
Lovely.
life.
And then those dreaded hormones squidge in, and suddenly you look at boys in a different way.
Yeah. But I still love my male friendships, and I'm sure it stems back to having all those amazing male cousins of mine.
It is interesting, but you know, I have an equal number of men friends and girlfriends. And I value their friendships equally, and I think it's a great thing to aspire to.
Yeah, I agree. So before we move on to other things, have you got a favourite childhood memory or a worst childhood memory?
I mean, again, writing about your childhood and writing about people is, I feel, an inordinate warmth towards everything and everybody I've written about. I mean, people who are even in my memory before I started writing the book thought, you know, they were pretty scabby people or something. I sort of became really fond of them when I started thinking about them and writing about them and where they slotted into my story. I mean, again, as a family, I think we have the ability. It's sort of bad things that happen to you fall off your shelf a bit. We don't really focus on the negative, and I think that's a very nice trait to have. And there were one or two sort of upsetting. I think I remember moments of acute injustice, or I think injustice is something that smarts and is harder to forget. But if you just have a bad experience, we always just made it into a good story.
And you're very good at that, especially in here. So you got a love for art. Yeah.
We need to take Stanley out.
He's digging up the garden. Here we are, Stan. You just go over there. Good boy.
Thank
Good
you.
boy.
Sorry
There we are. Sorry, I was wondering what he was doing down there. You stay there.
I'm more worried about Notting Hill sewing.
Hold on, let me just blow my hair. Here we are. Oh.
Are we recording?
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. So you have a massive love for art, which I think you got from when you were at college. Did you ever see that when you were at college, that it would be your career that you would then go into? And can you please tell us about, you've got so many things in there about your friendship with Tracy Emin and how you were one of the first people to bring artists from all over the world to London, and how you did it here in Notting Hill. There's just so many wonderful stories there about what you did with your life.
Well, I sort of fell in love with it's very hard to. I didn't study. I left school when I was 15. So because of being quite dyslexic and never being able to pass exams, so I never had a sort of career goal or a trajectory. I always see, rather than a game of football, that my life was a game of pinball, where I sort of ping from one thing to another, and then one ping gives you an enormous amount of energy and spins you off into another direction. And the art thing sort of came about because I travelled around Italy, hitchhiked around Italy with a mutual friend of ours who was studying history of art at Cambridge. And, I sort of absolutely loved him, and I really loved what we were doing, and that sort of heady mix of Renaissance art and Italy and wine and beautiful boy, and, what's not to love about that? And then I went on to study history of art myself, and one thing led to another. And one of our lecturers was at this amazing little college was Anthony Gormley. He just left Cambridge and he was doing his postgraduate at the Slade. And obviously I just thought he was the most amazing man. And he took me around his postgraduate show, and I just sort of realised that conceptual art, there was something really interesting in it. That generation of artists leaving art school, it was just an amazing thing, and I was in the right place at the right time to catch this wave of creativity. And I had a tiny little gallery down the Portobello Road, and it was just so cool. and
what made you get the gallery?
Well, I was a picture framer, and I was just meeting all these artists and things, and I was 23, and I just thought, can't be a picture framer all my life. I need to do something, and I loved. I don't know. It was just a confluence of really. My mum saying, "What are you going to do with your life? You can't just sit there, staining bits of wood." And I knew artists, I knew galleries. I'd started having exhibitions at home. Galleries would lend me things, and it was just I was good at selling because I enjoyed what I was selling. So it all, one thing led to another.
Yeah, well, and then you started creating art for many people all over the world.
Yeah, I mean, it was very parochial. London back in the 80s was very parochial, and it was sort of a bit risque to sell art from abroad. I mean, it's so different now, the world, but there was Cork Street, and then there was one other gallery called the Listen Gallery. But basically, it was a very small little world. There were very few collectors. But I was lucky, actually, endlessly lucky, but because of Virgin being nearby, I knew all these entrepreneurial people who were just making a little bit of money and interested in culture and creativity, and so I was very fortunate as well. But I was really interested in taking risks. Really, I just didn't want to be boring.
And you're certainly not boring. And would you say now, what's the difference between the art world now and the art world then, apart from it being much smaller? Do you think it's just the internet has exploded the amount of art that people can see?
It wasn't such a commodity. I mean, my rent was £2,000 a year, and even taking into account inflation, we could take risks. We weren't trapped in. We weren't trapped in a terrible business cycle, and because of this, it was just it felt very free, and there wasn't that art fair treadmill going around, and we felt like we were pioneers. But there were some really, really good artists out there, and there's some really, really good galleries still, and it's just picking your way through it.
Yeah, I find the whole art world very confusing, but I love having you. I love having you by my side. So from art, you then fell in love with Morocco, and I love how you describe how you fell in love with Morocco. If you could give us a little bit of that feeling, and then you bought a hotel and became a hotelier. And how did that all happen? It seemed to all happen really quickly.
Well, I mean, what happened there was we had no intention. I mean, this is where, dry white wine has been my friend actually through my life, because it's definitely, and mum actually still, even in my later life, her mantra of have courage, just rings in my ears all the time. And I was travelling around Morocco with a great friend of mine who I really adored and trusted, and I love his judgment. And it's been an extraordinary man called Hal James. And Mum and Dad were on holiday with us, and I had the kids, and we've been riding in the Atlas Mountains. And we were slightly in our cups after a long day in the saddle, and Hal said, I love it here, why don't we buy a little house together? And we had in our mind a little 2-bedroom house in the Medina, anyhow, we ended up buying a bigger ruined palace actually. And it's once you commit, you have to do it really well. And it's been an extraordinary project. We've been working on it for 18 years, through all of the. I mean, what I love about doing a project in Morocco, particularly, which is a very different country. It's not. I think it's slightly offensive to call it exotic, but it's got a richness and a completely different cultural foundation. And I've learned so much and met so many interesting people, and then I got very involved in the arts there. But I have to tell you, El Fen's on the cover of Condé Nast Traveller this month on their Gold List edition, and it's one of the top hotels in the world.
Well,
so
it is the most exquisite hotel, so that's amazing. One of the
So-
top hotels in the world it's getting an accolade for.
Yeah.
It's amazing. And are you opening back up at the moment?
Today. We're opening today, and it
Yay.
is really, really exciting. And I think that our travellers, our guests are a younger, international travellers, and I think that we've put in. I mean, we have rigorous COVID rules, and I think that it's going to be fine. I think I'm very excited about it. So.
Well, it's spectacular. I've been there many a time, and I absolutely love it.
bless you.
And the people that you've got there, everyone, and the fact that you're right in the middle of the souk, so you can go out and wander and see, as you say, such a different culture, but with such warm and welcoming and lovely people.
You love to come back. We took advantage of COVID actually early on. Today is a big moment for me actually, because it's been a huge year, publishing the book, and with El Fen, we decided that we were going to take advantage of the lockdown, and we've completely remodeled it. And it was frightening, sitting in my bedroom on Zoom calls, saying, are we going to hold our nerve on COVID? Are we going to emerge? Is it going to take 4 years? Will we be able to finance it? And we've done it, and we've got a lap pool on the terrace now. I mean, it is amazing.
Amazing.
Yeah, I'm so excited
How
about
exciting. And when we were last there, you were doing the development
That's
next
it.
door. Is that finished?
We finished
Oh,
it.
you finished it.
Yeah.
Oh, how amazing. And because a lap pool, that must be rare in...
Well, I think it's rare in the Medina anyhow.
Yeah.
To have it on the terrace is it's a bit Sex in the City, but we like that.
Amazing. And very Sex in the City, you also own an island.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful up in Scotland. How in the world did you sort of end up owning an island in Scotland?
Holly, that's another story. I mean, when I was writing all this down, I thought, oh my goodness, the island in Scotland is it's rather. This was my former husband Robert, who was the really driving force behind wanting to buy the island. God with his little sense of humour it's ended up that I own it now, and it wasn't my idea. But again, I always think with that island is you don't own it anyhow. I'm caretaking it, and I can't take it away. And I'm a passionate environmentalist, and up there I can really make a difference. And we planted, hundreds of thousands of trees, and we're really, it's plastic free. We're pretty much carbon neutral.
Amazing.
Apart from the Argo. And it's a place now, and I think during COVID, it's a place that people really feel people want people want to go to a calf-free zone and retreat from the insanity of the world, actually.
And that's managed to stay open and still have guests?
No. It was part of the lockdown. So half of the season we were locked down. But again, it's given us amazing opportunity to refurbish all the cottages, and so I've been really busy this year, and it's looking really good too. So I'm that's all open again, and I've got wonderful people running that, young people. I love youth. Want youth around.
Okay, just want to get the next question right, so I'm just going to read it quickly. Okay. Are you intrigued?
I know, I'm sort of getting a bit nervous now.
So now on to love. And you had an amazing relationship with Robert Devereux, my uncle, for many decades. When I say amazing, amazingly up and down and different things happening. And you had 4 wonderful children who were very young when your marriage started to fall apart. And this bit of the book, really resonated with me. I've got 3 young children at the moment. I couldn't even imagine what it would be like to have to go through bringing up young children, but also with a marriage that isn't working well. And you write something in your book which really, I'd love to just read it out. You said it was after a near-death incident that you decided that it wasn't sort of time to keep trying to keep this marriage together. You said, when stress mounts incrementally, many of us don't act to lessen the load until it's too late. Everything had been crumbling around me, but after that swim, I realised I had to turn my life around. The way to do it was not only to stop battling upstream, but to get out of the water altogether. Now, it must have just been so difficult going back to that heartache, going back to that difficult time of your life. Why did you feel it was important to put it in the book?
Well, early on in the book, I came upon an experience in my teens that I thought, should I write about it, should I not? And I was walking with a friend of mine, and she said, unless you write about the really difficult times as well as the good times, it's all just going to be a rather ghastly book, actually, And so I just decided to be brutally honest throughout the writing, and I realised that shame has had an enormous influence in all of our lives, and I hadn't really understood the role of shame. And if you carry a burden of shame and think you need to have secrets, it doesn't make for a comfortable life, actually. And I realised that I actually don't have any shame about anything that's happened. What happened to the children, it's horrible. Divorce is a terrible thing, even in the best of circumstances. And the children, I didn't drag on about it. It's only 1 chapter in the book, or 2, out of 25. So, but I wanted to acknowledge, actually, the suffering that, I wanted to honour the suffering that a family goes through when a marriage splits up. And I had a ringside seat in this one, so I could write about it. And it happens more and more. And I think that a lot of people who leave their families to start a new family or are in denial about what they've left behind. And so it meant a lot to me to put this in. Ultimately, there is redemption. It's not a blame thing, and it's an uncomfortable read, that bit, but there is redemption at the end. And it wanted to illustrate the sort of truth and reconciliation, and actually that you can grow through these experiences. But without writing about the difficult bit, you can't have the resolution at the end.
And I'm sure you've helped other people through writing about this as well, that people realise they're not doing this alone, and other people have had similar experiences as you.
Yeah, I think for that reason alone it's really important. And I get 2 or 3 and sometimes more than that emails of people saying thank you so much, or can you help me? I don't want that to be my accidental next job, to become a marriage therapist. I don't want to sort of identify by that, but I have had a lot of experience with this, and obviously people gravitate towards people who've had that experience. I mean, we still suffer the consequences of it. It's not something that goes away, and and I think as a family we've navigated it pretty well.
But at the time your kids were very young when it was really happening.
Yeah.
Did this unearth memories for them that they didn't have already?
I think we've talked about it. That's one of the things as a family that we've done, especially having Florence in the family. And there's no secrets ever. There's never been anybody who've quietly gone off and sulked in their bedrooms. We always have big rituals and discussions. And one of the things I've learned over this time is that it's no good discussing something once. It's no good saying sorry once. It's no good. Because it's a constantly, especially as children are growing up, or we're all growing up, it's a constantly evolving beast. And so to keep the conversations going, and it's been really important. So nothing surprised them. But actually, when I wrote it, and it had been edited, we all, the four kids and myself and their partners, actually sat under the shade of an apple tree, and I read it to them. I read the 2 chapters that were relevant to them, and we all had a cry together and said that's just how we remembered it. And so it was very it's very important that they knew what was in it, but I didn't give any of them a right to edit or change anything, because I didn't want them to feel responsible for what was in it.
And it's your memories, not their memories.
Yeah, and I've made that really clear, that it's a very much a personal story.
When you finished writing the book, because you had gone back through, unearthed so many memories, as you say, they all just bubbled up, did you feel like you'd sort of been through the ringer a little bit? Were you exhausted by the end?
It throws up so many things. It's a really long process writing a book. You get the first draft down, and then you put it in a drawer for 6 months and do nothing with it, thinking nobody's going to be interested in writing this. And then I read it through, and I didn't change the structure at all. Actually, I just wrote it as it happened. And then 1 or 2 friends read it and said, and your dad, and said, you've really got to get that out there. It's really interesting. And then 1 or 2 people who read it were really encouraging, really pushing me. And I've got a few friends who are writers, and they said, you just do it. Don't be a wimp. Expose yourself and do it. But that whole process takes 2 or 3 years. So by the time it came out, it was right in the middle of lockdown. Probably should have waited until another time. It came out, and then it got really good reviews, and it's been chugging along. I think the real challenge is to write a second book that's going to be really good too.
So that was going to be my next question. My next question is, you've got so many more years of life left, and you've got so many wonderful things you're doing. What do you think is next? Is another book next? Another hotel?
Holly, I don't know what you mustn't do. Or maybe that's the way to do it. Live your life, is to imagine that you are writing your memoir every time, and then it would push you out to do really interesting things. And I know that there's, I'm 61 now. And I know there's a lot of exciting adventures ahead. I'm very excited about particularly now, having had this year of this sort of fallow year of quiet. I think that next year we're all going to take a few risks. Maybe life's too short. I met I know it's such a cliche, life's too short, but I met a brain surgeon the other day. This beautiful Irish girl, 37. And when she told me she was a brain surgeon at John Radcliffe Hospital, I nearly sort of fell off my chair. That's terrible sexism, I know, but I mean, and she said, I'm a brain surgeon. Life is too short. You've got to get out there. I see death all the time, and it's good. It's a good reminder.
Yeah, and the importance of family and spending time with them. This year's been very much that, hasn't it? Live life and spend it with the people that you love.
I know. Families. I mean, this book is so much about loyalty. You know, how the security in having a close family. You know, caring for each other. It gives us the strength to care for other people more. You know, be outward looking, and yeah, I think at the end of this year, we really value people.
We do. And talking of family, at the beginning of this talk, you were saying how Stephen Navin turned to you and said, "What would Granddaddy think of back when Trump came into power?" And what he was saying. What do you think Granddaddy would have thought of this year?
Well, you know, he had this ability to turn anything that was negative into a positive. And actually, you know, a lot of us have got his mantra on our wrists or about our body, and I've had tattooed for my 60th, "Isn't life wonderful?" And that was Dad's sort of every night at 6 o'clock he'd sit down and pour himself a gin and tonic and just say, "Oh, isn't life wonderful?"
And I remember that vividly.
So nice, isn't
Yeah.
it?
Isn't life wonderful? Isn't he wonderful? Aren't
Me.
you wonderful? So thank you so very much for chatting to me.
Wow.
I highly recommend buying this book. It's an amazing book. And it's a really interesting read. And so I thank you. Big hugs from me. And just before we end, can you tell me who H is?
Oh joy, oh joy. I can't, I'm afraid. But he's a very happy memory.
It sounded wonderful.